at this hour, a bombshell report on just what was happening at the Justice Department during the Trump administration. A secret investigation to find the source of leaks, an investigation targeting Democrats in Congress. President Biden hinting at a message for President Putin in their summit next week. But first, critical meetings in England with his G7 allies. And just what do we need to know before younger children can be vaccinated for COVID-19? One doctor warning shots in the coming months, maybe too soon. But what does that mean for the fight against the pandemic? At this hour, shocking revelations about how the DOJ weaponized its power under Donald Trump, targeting Democratic lawmakers, their staff, even their family members. It is the latest example of the very real threat facing our democracy. The Trump Justice Department subpoenaed Apple for data from at least 100 accounts as part of a leak investigation. And among the targets, House Intel Chair Adam Schiff and committee member Eric Swalwell. The DOJ was looking for the source of news stories, which revealed connections between Trump associates and Russia. That data did not tie the committee to the leaks. Chairman Schiff called the revelations a, quote, terrible abuse of power. He is set to brief House Democrats on the Trump DOJ subpoenas in the next hour. CNN's Whitney Wild and Manu Raju joining us now with the very latest on this major story. So, Whitney, right now, what do we know? I mean, this has been a whirlwind, 14 hours at this point?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we know is that these are now coming to light. There was a gag order that expanded for years. 3 times DOJ renewed that gag order to keep this information a secret. This gag order extending all the way through the Trump administration and then only being revealed and because it was expired in May. So the reason that anybody's hearing about it now, Erica, is because members of the House Intelligence Committee learned from Apple, not from DOJ, from Apple, that their data had been subjected to these subpoenas and seizures by federal prosecutors. So here's what we know. This began under then Attorney General Jeff Sessions. It hit a brick wall at some point. Now, we're learning today that then Attorney General Jeff Sessions did not have any involvement, didn't know about these subpoenas because he notably had recused himself from any investigation involving Russia. It hit a dead end. Then Bill Barr came on the scene and revived this. Basically, investigators had gone to Bill Barr and said, we hit a brick wall, and he said, keep digging. So what we know is that it didn't turn up anything. But what is so significant here is that typically when the Department of Justice is going after members of Congress, it is because of some sort of public corruption investigation or other types of crimes. It's rare to see the Department of Justice simply go after a president's political enemies for the sole purpose of he didn't like the leaks that were coming out of what he thought was the House Intelligence Committee. So this subpoena was extraordinarily broad. So shocking that you would go after members of Congress, and then further, Erica, that you would go after the personal connections of the members of Congress, family members. And what is even more startling is that this dragnet swept up metadata from a child. A minor was involved in this in some capacity. We know it's just the metadata, so we don't know what the contents of the communications were, but it is really shocking, and it follows a pattern we've seen. So I think we have a full screen up to sort of bring this web into clearer view, because here's who DOJ had gone after. House Intelligence Democrats, CNN reporter Barbara Starr, Washington Post reporters, New York Times reporters, and Twitter. This is the group of public-facing people that the Trump administration and apparently the Department of Justice at the time believed were in some way the enemy, and so they went after them, again, going after their personal connections, which is extraordinarily rare, Erica. And so the questions now moving forward for the Department of Justice is Attorney General Merrick Garland going to review this? And if there's a policy in place now that would have allowed for that, is that going to change moving forward?
Yeah, a lot of questions, and a lot of them from Merrick Garland, as you point out. Manu, next hour, Democrats on House Intel are set to be briefed on this by Chairman Schiff. Have we heard any tidbits about what he is going to tell them, what more we know about that meeting?
Well, this is the first time a lot of the members are learning about what happened here when the news broke last night. In fact, and speaking to a number of the members on the committee, a lot of them simply just do not know whether or not their records were seized, because the way that they were notified was via Apple, and it was an email that came to them that looked like a spam email, according to people that I've spoken to, and presumably some of those email notifications, if they actually came to them, were swept up into their spam folder themselves. So some of the members just simply do not know if they or their staffs were targeted by this Justice Department subpoena, if the records were seized in any way. And it comes amid tension among the House Democratic leaders of the House Intelligence Committee and the Justice Department, because the Democrats over the past month, Adam Schiff, the chairman of the committee, when he learned about this, he engaged in communication with the Justice Department staff to try to get more information about what exactly this subpoena entailed, tried to get all the details about this. And according to Schiff and according to committee officials that I've spoken with, they have not gotten that information yet. So expect that tension to play out, them demanding more information. And if they don't get it, we'll see what they decide to do next. Erica?
Yeah, absolutely. Manu, Whitney, thank you both. Joining me now, CNN senior law enforcement analyst, former deputy director of the FBI, Andrew McCabe, and CNN legal analyst, Ellie Honing. He's a former federal and state prosecutor. Good to have both of you with us. Andy, I want to start with you because, we're talking about how people found out about things. You were a target here. And as we know, this gag order was just lifted. So how and when were you notified?
So, Erica, I haven't been notified yet. To my knowledge, it's possible I received a notification and just didn't see it or didn't recognize it for what it was. I think Manu described that accurately, as they sometimes, come into your account with everything else and it doesn't really grab your attention. So I'm kind of still hanging in the breeze here to see if that sort of notification comes my way. Although I will say that I think we're far beyond the point of having to rely on or being forced to rely on being notified by service providers. I think it's time that most of us heard from the Department of Justice.
I mean, that in itself really is shocking, and it's a fair point. And the question a lot of people have is not only what was happening at the Department of Justice, but what's happening now. Ellie, as we look at this, you just wrote a book, couldn't be more timely, about Bill Barr. Your title is Hatchet Man: How Bill Barr Broke the Prosecutor's Code and Corrupted the Justice Department. Look, that's a clear indication, I think, of how you feel about Barr as Attorney General. But based on what has transpired since last night, how would you refer to him now?
It's worse than that. It's worse than I even knew. The fundamental corruption here goes even deeper than we understood. And let me try to explain exactly how. First of all, as a prosecutor, you have an ethical duty not to pursue an investigation unless you have some what we call predication, some basis of evidence. And the reporting that Whitney just gave us is that Bill Barr had none. He told these prosecutors, you have nothing but keep going. That's what we call a fishing expedition. Not only that, they targeted politically only Democratic members of Congress. They targeted those people's families and staff members. They went to court to get a gag order to keep it secret. And I want to pick up on something Andy just said that's so important. It is not fair for the current DOJ, for Merrick Garland, to leave people who might or might not have been violated, had their privacy violated, to leave them in a state of flux. Merrick Garland has an affirmative obligation to dig into these files, figure out whose records were subpoenaed, and affirmatively notify them, let them know one way or the other right now.
There's the notification, but what else does he need to do? I mean, there could still be people, right? The understanding is there are still people at DOJ who were involved with some of this.
Well, there needs to be an investigation by the DOJ Inspector General, for one thing, and Congress needs to do its job. And I know Andy has thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, the fact that there are still Trump political appointees at the Department of Justice is just head spinning. There's no excuse for that, especially now that we know what was going on in the waning months of that administration. And I agree with Ellie entirely. It is time for the Attorney General to take hold of the situation, to deliver some transparency to the American people, to Congress, to those folks like myself who have been essentially tormented with one investigation after another for the last 4 years. This has been going on for me. It's time to have an accounting of where we stand and what sort of inappropriate measures are taking place.
As we're trying to figure out what was happening and when, I just want to take us all back to this moment in 2019 when then Senator Kamala Harris was questioning Bill Barr. Let's take a listen.
Has the president or anyone at the White House ever asked or suggested that you open an investigation of anyone?
I wouldn't.
Yes or no?
Could you repeat that question?
I will repeat it. Yeah. Has the president or anyone at the White House ever asked or suggested that you open an investigation of anyone? Yes or no, please, sir?
The president or anybody else?
Seems you would remember something like that and be able to tell us.
Look, Ellie, at the time, there was a lot made of that non-answer and the exchange, knowing what we know now. So Barr didn't open this investigation, but he revived it. That puts his answer in a different light.
Yeah, that clip is so telling. Look, I will stipulate Bill Barr is a smart man. However, when asked a very straightforward question by then Senator Kamala Harris, he suddenly played dumb. He hemmed and hawed. He pretended not to understand the meaning of words like suggest or ask. That answer to me is so telling, because if it's a no, nobody ever asked or suggested, say no. If it's a yes and there's nothing wrong with it, say yes. And that answer by Barr tells me the answer is yes, and he knew damn well it was wrong, and he was trying to wriggle out of it.
It also makes you wonder if there's anything else that we are going to be learning in the coming months or the coming years. You know, when we look at what we're learning about this one incident, the fact that there was this investigation, which by all accounts and by all the reporting didn't really turn anything up, but the gag order, Andy, was renewed 3 times, right? And it brought it all the way through, through to May when finally there started to be some acknowledgement because it had been lifted. That in itself, if we're looking from a political lens, the way that the gag order was extended, should we read anything into that, Andy?
Absolutely, you should. So there's only 2 reasons they would extend that gag order in the way they apparently did in this situation. The first is to continue holding open an investigation that is turning up no results, an investigation that should have been closed months, maybe years, who knows, earlier. So that in itself raises all kinds of political questions. Why have they dug their teeth in so hard and won't let this thing go? The second reason they may have extended those gag orders was simply to keep delaying the revelation of this inappropriate investigation until they're gone. And again, that's just political cover, right? That's like, let's postpone the inevitable and let the next administration have to deal with this time bomb when it goes off.
Yeah, it is remarkable. And the fact that you still have not officially been notified, yet another piece to add to that. Andrew McCabe, Ellie Honig, always appreciate it. Thank you both. Meantime, while we are following all of these rapid developments here at home, President Biden, of course, on the world stage for the first time as president. We'll take you live to England for the G7 summit. Plus, a new focus on COVID vaccines for younger children. Just how young is too young? What experts say they need to know before answering that question. At this hour, as President Biden continues his overseas trip, his domestic agenda is at a crossroads. A bipartisan group of senators now says they've reached a deal on a new infrastructure package that includes no tax hikes. Some progressive senators, though, not on board, threatening to oppose it. CNN's Lauren Fox joining us now with the latest. So, Lauren, what is in the deal? And based on that, where do things stand right now?
Well, look, we don't have all the details of specifically what has been included. This bipartisan group has kept some of those details under wraps, and that's because they are looking to try to see if they can sell this proposal to both of their sides. You know, Republicans are going back to their leadership, Democrats going back to their leadership, also briefing the White House on what they think they have agreed to. But we do know a few things. One of them is that this proposal is about $1.2 trillion total, and it's about $579 billion in new money. That is significant, of course, because that's above about the $300 billion that Shelley Moore Capito, the Republicans' top negotiator in those talks with the White House, got to before those discussions were completely ended by the White House. But I do think one thing to keep in mind here is that there are a lot of progressives who have argued privately and publicly this week that they are not just going to back this proposal because the bipartisan group of members, 10 people, agree to something. They are arguing they want to make sure there are other proposals, climate change proposals included, as well as enough money for mass transit for a lot of lawmakers who are from the East Coast corridor. Those are the kinds of items they're going to be looking for. So I think that we have to let this play out, in part because Democrats and Republicans are going to have to see if they can get broader buy-in from not just those members who are in the middle and have been negotiating privately for several weeks. Erica?
All right, Lauren, we'll continue to watch it, as we know you will. Thank you so much. Just ahead, President Biden on the world stage. His first G7 summit as president now underway, and his message for Vladimir Putin ahead of their meeting next. Happening at this hour, the first in-person G7 summit in nearly 2 years. Now underway. And it's also President Biden's first since taking office. He's, of course, meeting with leaders from around the world. Up first on their agenda, a focus on the global economy and recovery from the coronavirus pandemic. Joining me now, CNN's Jeff Zeleny and CNN's Nick Robertson, who are there at the location of the summit. So, Jeff, as we move into, we're now in day one here. What are we expecting over the next couple of days?
Well, Erica, these leaders really want to, get back to know each other on a face-to-face basis. The fact that they are meeting together in a room, which they are still in right now at this moment, is pretty extraordinary given the global pandemic. So there was a lot of elbow diplomacy. We saw them earlier this morning giving each other the elbow, but now they are meeting without cameras in the room and really talking about how to move the world beyond this pandemic that has crippled the economy and, of course, caused deep ramifications. So there are some tough issues that they are going to discuss. They all are likely to come to an agreement on a global minimum tax, for example, of 15%. President Biden, of course, is supportive of that, as are all the others. But the biggest part of this, I think, is the relationships that are building. President Trump, who, of course, for 4 years really rattled this establishment, no longer here. President Biden wants to say America's back and show that that is the case. But of course, all of this is leading into his meeting next week with Russian President Vladimir Putin. He was asked earlier this morning about what that meeting would look like.
Mr. President, what's your message to Putin?
I'll tell you after I deliver it.
So he says he'll tell us after he delivers it. This follows just a couple days ago. He said, "I will let Putin know what he needs to know." So clearly a lot of brinksmanship here, talking about some tough talk, if you will. But the point of meeting these leaders of democracies first is to sort of create some momentum going into that meeting next Wednesday in Geneva with Vladimir Putin. Erica.
Creating that momentum, but Nick, there's also been a lot made too that it's not just about the momentum, right? It's, as Jeff touched on, it's about these relationships and in many ways rekindling some of them and also sort of giving a new sense, I guess, to how the United States is being represented on the world stage. What's your sense at this point, Nick? How is that playing out for President Biden in terms of achieving those goals?
Yeah, I suppose you could take what Boris Johnson said as a sort of a litmus test of the change between President Trump to President Biden. He described him as a breath of fresh air. And I think when you look at that family photograph that was being taken today of the leaders standing there, a little bit of social distancing, all standing there out in the fresh air, slightly away from each other. But as they walked off of that sort of set, if you like, you saw President Biden put his arm around one of the leaders. I couldn't quite see if it was Justin Trudeau or if it was Mario Draghi, the Italian Prime Minister. But that sort of human warmth, the human touch, very un-Trump-like. And I was just looking at a tweet that came in just seconds ago from the European Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, a big voice in the European Union, of course. And I think this speaks to how President Biden is reaching across to other leaders in a way that President Trump didn't. This is what she's saying about the meetings coming up. Like-minded countries sharing the same values and interests and worldview will discuss how to come together and over the pandemic and be stronger. And talking as well about a close transatlantic unity is essential to face today's challenges. These leaders are not coming into this meeting keeping their thoughts close to themselves. They're not coming into it with positions that appear to be antagonistic to President Biden. So I think the White House's, messaging in advance of the G7 about what they want to achieve and how they hope to achieve it, bringing in allies, sharing the values of democracy, a potential inflection point in history where the democracies need to stand up against autocracies. All that messaging has gone down well. The real test, of course, is going to come in the detail of the talks to see the depth of the agreements that are established here. But I think where we stand at the moment, President Biden is certainly on the course that he wants to be on, as far as we know.
And there's also, Jeff, it's sort of this delicate dance, right, for President Biden in terms of this. Obviously, the White House wants this to be about the Biden administration. They want it to be about where President Biden is taking the agenda, is taking the country, is taking these relationships. But it's tough to look at that lane without looking at how we got here, even though I know there's not a real desire to bring up former President Trump.
I think former President Trump's name certainly comes up a lot on television and in political circles. It's probably not coming up very much in that room where these leaders are meeting right now. Without aides or without cameras, they are talking about their way forward. So as Nick was just saying, I mean, the words from Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who was a Trump ally, we have to remember that. He said of President Biden, it's a breath of fresh air. So that is the sense you get here. Not much tension here. Now, the question is what actually will come of this in a substantive way. There are substantive differences between these countries, but for now, at least, I think just the fact that there's not someone here trying to stir things up and be essentially a bull in a china shop, if you will, that is certainly much more diplomatic. And we also are learning this morning that the White House is inviting German Chancellor Angela Merkel to Washington next month for her first visit there. So that certainly is one more indication here about President Biden continues to reach out and tick through these world leaders. He's been on the world stage much of his professional life in the Senate and as the vice president, but never been in the room like this as part of this club. Erica.
Jeff Zeleny, Nick Robertson, appreciate it. Thank you both. Also today, First Lady Jill Biden meeting the Duchess of Cambridge for the first time. Their visit today, could it be a practice run of sorts? The Bidens getting ready for a visit with the Queen over the weekend. CNN's Kate Bennett joining me now. So, Kate, step one, looks like everything went well at school there this morning for Dr. Biden and for the Duchess.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Dr. Biden couldn't be more at home than she is in a classroom. She's been a teacher for many decades, so this was a nice place for her to land for her first official meeting with Kate Middleton, the Duchess of Cambridge. They visited the school. They went outside. There were bunnies. There was a, bowl of carrots. It's a very bucolic English countryside visit. And they had a really good time. The First Lady just tweeted, actually, that they could have talked for hours about early childhood education, about the role that elementary school plays, and then going through to community college, where Dr. Biden is a professor to this day. So certainly a lot in common and a good run up to the meeting with the Queen. It's interesting, though, everyone top of mind has new baby Lilibet, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's new baby. And Kate Middleton, the Duchess of Cambridge, was actually asked today whether or not she'd met the baby yet or FaceTimed it. Let's see what she says.
I wish her all the very best. I can't wait to meet her because we haven't yet met her yet. So hopefully that will be soon.
So not even a video meet and greet just yet, but everyone is very excited about that new baby. And of course, Dr. Biden is very good friends with Prince Harry. They met way back in 2012. She's been to a number of his Invictus Games events and vice versa. So she's familiar with Harry, but the Queen is going to be something different for her.
It will be. There's been a lot made, too. I know here at home we talk a lot about President Biden, the loss that he has gone through in his life. That's been such a connection point for him with people that console her in chief. He brought up the late Prince Philip when he was announcing this vaccine initiative yesterday, marking what would have been his 100th birthday. How much is being made, is it your sense, about what that connection could be between President Biden and the Queen, given this recent loss?
I think it's going to be very strong, and you make an excellent point here. The Bidens really do connect with people a lot of time over grief, and clearly the Queen is experiencing that. This was, her husband for decades, and it was his birthday the other day, and she's at Windsor Castle, which was a favored place that they would go. So certainly the Bidens are going to be sensitive to that. I believe they will offer formal condolence in person. This, again, is going to be a visit for them that, through their years as vice president and second lady have had similar experiences, but now that they're in the spotlight and now that they're the primary ambassadors, if you will, of the United States, certainly meeting a queen who has met during her reign as queen 12 former presidents of the United States. She's an old hat at this. This will be something new for the Bidens, and I think you're right. There is an empathetic moment that the two parties can share. We'll look forward to seeing that on Sunday.
Yeah, absolutely. Kate Bennett, always good to see you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Still to come, this bombshell report about the Trump Justice Department's secret subpoenas of Democratic lawmakers and, in some cases, their family members. I'm going to speak with a member of the House Intelligence Committee about what should happen next. Returning to our top story, bombshell reporting about the Trump Justice Department revealing just how far the administration was willing to go to take down perceived enemies, including seizing the data records of prominent Democrats, their staff, even their families, in an attempt to find Russia-related leaks. Joining me now to discuss, Democratic Congressman Peter Welch. He is a member of the House Intelligence Committee and also the Oversight and Reform Committee. Sir, good to have you with us today. First of all, do you have any reason to believe that you or anyone on your staff was targeted with this subpoena?
I don't, but it really is less important whether I was targeted than that anyone doing their official job as a member of Congress, in fact, was targeted. That's the issue.
That being the issue, what's the action plan?
Well, first of all, why is it significant? You have the president who was attacking the press, getting subpoenas against press who were doing their job. That's number one. And the press is essential to the well-being of a democracy. And it was a follow-up on the president's attack on the press that was relentless, the fake news and so on. Secondly, he then took this into what appears to be a vendetta, obviously, against Adam Schiff, the chair, where the members of the committee, himself very much among them, were doing their job of oversight. And then third, he weaponized the Justice Department with his compliant Attorney General, William Barr, who himself brought into the Justice Department trusted aides who had no experience in this, but were essentially a separate unit to deal with things that were of personal interest to the president. So it's very, very threatening to democratic principles of A, a free press, and B, an independent legislative branch of government, co-equal with the executive.
So you lay out there the threat, but then what do you do about that? Based on everything that you just laid out, what would you like to see happen moving forward, both in Congress and at the DOJ?
Chairman Schiff's suggestion that the independent investigator, the Inspector General, do an investigation and a report, I think is the right way to go. Because this is not about him individually or whoever among the committee members was targeted or even among the press members. It's really about the principle of the independence of a legislative branch. It's about the independence of the press. And it's also about the rule of law. Can a president of the United States essentially weaponize the Justice Department to go after perceived political enemies? That's really the question that has been raised here. Mm-hmm. So the best way to proceed is not to have it be in a political atmosphere, but to have the Inspector General do the job, a full investigation and a full report, and proceed from there.
Do you want to hear from Merrick Garland?
I don't know this. I want to hear from the Inspector General first. That's what I think is the way to go. And Merrick Garland was not serving in this capacity at the time this happened in 2017 and 2018 and onward.
So you're not as concerned with, what's happening now, because there is some concern, and we've heard certainly throughout the morning and since this story broke last night, there is concern about who is still at DOJ.
Well, no, that's a good point. And I am concerned about that because many of those special appointees by then Attorney General Barr were essentially assigned to do the dirty work of the president, to essentially implement his attack on the independence of the legislative branch. So I am concerned about that, and that would be an issue with Merrick Garland. But the real question here is, what did then President Trump do? What did Attorney General Barr do? It is just pretty astonishing, and I think unprecedented, that there are subpoenas for the records of independent members of the legislative branch and apparently the family members of the members of Congress. So that is a breach of norms that is unprecedented, even in the Nixon years.
Have you heard from any of your Republican colleagues? Have you spoken with any of them about this?
I haven't, but I look forward to talking to them. It's a really good point you're making with that question, and that is that it could be Adam Schiff today, But it could be Devin Nunes tomorrow if you don't have some norms that are abided by, whether it's a Republican or a Democratic president. So this is really about the members of Congress having to act to protect the independence in the authority of the separate and equal branch of government. That was under attack by President Trump, as was the freedom of press.
Congressman Welch, appreciate your time today. Thank you.